Hi, this is Jacqueline Eckern with Eating Disorder Hope and Addiction Hope. And today interviewing Kevin Polky of KP Counseling and some other very exciting ventures that he's involved with. With that, Kevin, I'd like to introduce you. Please tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline, for having me on your show today. I've been an addiction counselor as well as a clinical social worker for coming up on almost 30 years now, and so that has been in itself a whole experience and journey of evolving to a lot of different types of activities through that time period. Earlier in my life, I was a competitive athlete, football player, wrestler, and then was a competitive bodybuilder at the state and national level through my teen years and early 20s. And that then kind of led as a foundational piece to then becoming a counselor and then later a social worker and therapist.
Wonderful. Well, that background's really interesting because it sounds like you can relate to a broad array of people. And unfortunately, addiction and behavioral issues of all sorts, depression, anxiety, are common in athletes as well as the general public. So I think that makes you very intriguing.
And for me, the thing, and of course I didn't know this at the time, but the things that I learned being competing at the state and national level when I was a bodybuilder, then really worked as a template for me to then be able to dive into the studies and the art of being a therapist, and then later a business owner, which now my primary role is as founder and executive director of KP Counseling. So it was really not that they were directly lined up, but that it was really this template that what I used early on in my athletic career then helped the same template to be a counselor and then later in business and as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. Successful practices like adaptability.
Yep, 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 exactly.
And
Exactly.
so, what is your role specifically um, as the founder right now? What do you do on a daily basis?
So I'm very fortunate that I have kind of I still have an opportunity to do a hybrid of things. Not only leading KP counseling from the vision of where we're going to do and what services we're offering and community outreach that we're doing in the Northern Illinois and Southern Wisconsin area, but I also have a small caseload that I still see clients. So I still do 1 day a week of counseling, individual and family counseling, and then I also do 3 men's groups that I run every week. And so that's my clinical responsibilities. And then administratively, my responsibilities are just we have 33 therapists that work at KP at 2 different locations in the Rockford area. And then we have other entities in which we're integrated within school systems that we provide services within the school systems. So it's a combination of different things that administratively I do those as well as help with the clinical development of our therapists.
Wow, I that's impressive how much reach you have. Tell us about these men's groups, if you will, please.
Sure. So as I was, as one aspect of my life was coming to a close, ending my career in bodybuilding and competitive athletics, and then not knowing for sure where I was going, even though I had a degree in psychology, men's psychology work and what we called back in the late 80s and early 90s called men's work was really a foundational aspect of where I started doing work on myself, really forming who I was and who I wanted to be as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a leader, and really that foundational work started there. And then as time went on, really taking that and continuing the men's work within the Rockford area and Northern Illinois area by leading groups. I've been leading these particular groups since 1997, and it's a weekly 2-hour group. And some of the men have continued to be in the group since '97. Um, and obviously the majority haven't. They you get what they need and then they move on. But to me, it's one of the things that I enjoy and continue to feel like I can give back to that way, as well as I receive something um, regarding doing that work of how can I myself be a man of integrity in all my affairs, and help other men, invite other men into doing the same.
Oh, that's wonderful. I know, and even in my own, I'm a therapist too, and in my own work, um, leading up to that, one of the things my supervisor used to always say is the goal is to operate at your highest level of integrity, which I think is a really leads to an inner dignity and respect for yourself that is hard to shake. And I think that is a gift to men. So with with the groups and the 2 locations, what are the levels of care that you're offering at KP?
Yeah. So we offer our core competency. The main thing that we offer is the individual session that may either be with an individual person or it may be for family sessions.
Yeah.
That's probably our core competency or the core thing that we do. But we also offer outpatient groups such as the men's groups and some
Yeah.
other genders. We have had at different times gender specific groups, women's groups, adolescent boys groups, adolescent girls groups at different times based upon need and based upon therapist availability. And but we also do substance abuse outpatient groups as well as we do intensive outpatient substance abuse group.
Wonderful. Okay. And for the intensive outpatient group, how does that work? What kind of hours of a commitment is it for folks so they can
Yep,
kind of get an idea of what
sure.
might be available?
Yep. So typically, when we think of addiction work, we think of, or mental health, behavioral health in general, we think of three different levels. Level one is the outpatient, which I was just describing. And
Yeah.
then level two is intensive outpatient, or it's minimum of 9 hours of therapy or treatment per week. At KP, we offer it Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 5:30 to 8:30. And then that may incorporate or does incorporate individual work as well, or family work as necessary. And then a level three is when you go inpatient or residential.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks for outlining that. Um, with the addiction treatment, it sounds like you also bring a real realm of depth and opportunity for people to dive deeper into core issues. So it's not just addressed superficially. And it sounds, if I'm hearing this correctly, it's you can offer support to the individual and the family, either, I mean, through the number of therapists you have and
So in a lot of ways, we look at, especially when it comes to, let's say, addiction, regardless if it's with a substance, or if it is with like food, or if it's other type of process like gambling or pornography or sex or something like that. It many times that is the symptom and may not be the core problem. In other words, that may be why you're coming in for counseling, and we need to address that behavior and arrest that behavior, so that we can then get the smoke out of the way to find out where the problem or where the fire is. And so as we're looking at how do we go through the behavioral changes that are necessary to maintain that sobriety, we also have to look at changing our thinking that has led to this, and then what may be the underlying thing that we're trying to medicate or trying to anesthetize, or what dragon we're chasing after. If it's like in my own journey with bodybuilding, what was I really doing it for? Well, it was seeking some type of identity or approval. Well, I would have never been able to articulate that at the time when I was going through it, but it definitely kept me doing it longer than I should have. I knew that I should have been done before I was done, but the fear of what was the unknown and the fear of not doing it anymore kept me continuing the behavior and continue in the lifestyle and everything. And but I had to, in my case, retire and get out of it so that I could then start looking at what was the underlining real questions or wounds that I had to address.
yeah, I hear a lot of hope here because there's going into treatment for something, whether it's for addiction or just outpatient therapy, can feel a little overwhelming. But even in your own case, by addressing whatever the presenting issue is, there's an opportunity to then find the gold underneath, because often what we think is the problem isn't. And if we can find healing with ongoing depression, anxiety, PTSD, all variables, trauma,
Yep, yep.
then we can live at a much more happier, fulfilling level in life. And I think that's really encouraging that you and KP counseling really incorporate that.
And so we talk a lot and we do a lot of continue professional and personal development with the therapist and the clinical staff on them doing their own work so that they are more able to partner with the clients and recognize but also empathize and guide as we're partnering with them through their own journey, because ultimately those behaviors, regardless of what they were, they served a purpose from that with that wound. And now the person's coming in for counseling because it's no longer serving the same level of purpose, or the cost is getting too great and I need to change something. And
Yes.
so we as clinicians are recognizing there is that tension between what did work and no longer is working, and really trying to make sure that there isn't this feeling of judgment. We get it, we understand, globally we understand, we just need to hear your particular story, so help you kind of move the needle in your life to where you want to be, kind of like you said, to be able to live the life that you were intended to live.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm also interested if you could share with us a little bit about your work with your podcast and the journey, and a wonderful nonprofit called Shatter Our Silence. Can you
Yeah.
tell us more about these items?
Sure. Well, I'll start with Shatter Our Silence first. That really I would have never guessed, you know, 5, 6 years ago, I would have never guessed that a lot of my presentation workshops are on suicide and suicide prevention. I would have never guessed that because, well, I just wouldn't guess that. But unfortunately, what ended up happening, my son graduated from a small private, local private Christian school of about 100 kids in his class. And a year after he graduated, his third classmate out of 100 died from suicide. And being at that third funeral, with him and with his classmates and some of the staff, and I had been involved with the postvention, when some of those students had died, bringing staff in to help. But this particular one, I think because it was the third one, it made me kind of pause and go, okay, what is it? I've been a counselor for 25 years, but I need to do something more. And I didn't know what that was, but it just seemed like there was this tendency that a young adult would die, everyone would stop, and then come rallying around, around the school, around the students, around the staff and the family. And then of course life goes on, and 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks later, majority of people are back to normal. But those ones that are directly impacted, they don't. And then how do we somehow intervene so this doesn't happen again?
Yes.
And so I reached out to some community members, in the Rockford area, and originally it was just going to be a kind of a possibly a one and done,
Yeah.
awareness rally, and then later, because of the response to that, I was being asked to go and speak at schools about this, and then I started doing deeper and deeper research on it and came up with some curriculum, and then later that evolved into a nonprofit, and we've now, I think, it's right around 15 plus thousand that, high school students we've brought the program to, and around another 5 to 6 thousand middle school students. And we've also gone into colleges and universities as well, with some of the work that we created regarding this idea of, helping young adults help young adults in when they're in that darkness, so that they don't have to be silent around it, so that the person who is in that darkness not to be silent, but then the friend, the brother, the sister, to not be silent when someone reaches out to them. What are the warning signs? What are the factors that lead to that darkness? And then what to do with it. We don't want them to be the therapist. We just want them to not be silent and reach out and get them connected with someone that can help them out of that darkness.
Wow, that's wonderful. We'd love to share this program on addiction hope and eating disorder hope. So I will get with you so we have a feature page for
Sure.
these. Um,
Sure.
and where do people go to find out? What's the website?
So the website for that particular is
Yes.
www.shatter ShatterRour silence .org. It's really about how do we shatter all of our silence around the factors that lead to young adult suicide.
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful. Okay. And then I also know you have your own website and are doing some interesting work there with the journey. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So when I first started KP um, in 2001, one of the things that I wanted to do was not just provide clinical social work, clinical counseling for my clients, but then also wanted to give them something in between sessions. And so I started off. Again, this is in 2001, and not being super technical savvy, it was literally one page, what I called then a newsletter. It was really a reflection or an inspirational story that I would, put on one page with a quote and with a picture, and it was just something that I mailed out once a month. In this case, I just happened to mail it out with their statement to save on postage, right? So I did that, and I did that probably for about 9 years, doing it that way, and then it was getting costly because of the volume from that end, and then this whole internet computer thing was coming into play. And so I played around with the idea of doing blogs and then putting things on Facebook. And then later, I got introduced to podcasts and getting free content. And so I took the same concept that I was doing in the early 2000s and trying to give out kind of a way to give out information that people may not have, and a way of giving inspiration or hope, even if it just reached one person, how to kind of see another way. So the journey is really based upon Joseph Campbell's work called The Hero's Journey, about this idea that we all are on this journey of life, that we go from order to disorder, or the dark night of our soul, or the initiation process. And there is where we do this, the inner work. And in that inner work is how we start working on being whole. And what we learn there is in the return, or the reorder. And so the guests that come on the show are just ordinary people sharing their story of how they failed forward, how they have had setbacks in their life. It could be mental illness stuff, it could be suicide, or someone in their family being suicidal or dying from suicide, or addiction, or it may be just a change, a career change, a change in life, retirement. What did they learn regarding this shift or this setback? What was the experience like? What did they learn from it? And then how are they now giving back because of it? And essentially, that's the crux of the journey, the podcast, the journey. And then I also have times where I'll do some reflecting. It's called Reflections on the Journey, where just maybe some things that I'm pondering or contemplating, or something that I've noticed, and then I share that. Or I may have, like a couple months ago, I did a piece on guided imagery, and did a guided imagery exercise. So it depends, but the core is really the conversations, or the interviews that we have. I call them I call them interviews, but they're really conversations, and just letting someone share their story, and me kind of getting to know them and their journey, what they learned along their journey.
Sounds very inspiring. And as you initially intended, that in between sessions, kind of sustaining um, comfort. And what you're doing, in addition to Joseph Campbell's work, it reminds me of Viktor Frankl, in that if we can find meaning in suffering, then it is not pointless. And I think
Ab-
that people need that message.
Yeah, but absolutely, yeah, Frankel's work has been also integral in not only the workshops that I create, um, but uh, but also in the journey. Is that kind of like uh, in the 6 stages of grieving. In the 6 stages about finding meaning in the loss of a loved one or a loss of identity or a loss that may happen, and being able uh, to have hope in, even though we may not find out right now, it may not be being revealed right now, but if we stay with it and we continue moving forward, the meaning will be revealed at some point of why we're going through what we're going through. Not from a standpoint of like a judgment of like this is a punishment or of something like that, but more from a standpoint of what can we learn from the obstacle that is in our way, instead of it being some kind of judgment that this obstacle is in our journey.
Very cool. So I would imagine people watching this would really like to check out your podcast, follow your reflections. Where can we send them?
So the journey is available wherever you get podcasts, iTunes, Google Play. You can just look up Kevin Polky, The Journey,
Okay.
or you can go and get all of them on at my website. That's because we have video as well as audio, and you can go to Kevin Polky, KevinPolky.com, and then all the different blogs or articles that I've written, as well as the different podcasts that I've done over the last 2 years, can be found there. And there's some other things as well, but that's most of that content is right there on the website.
Ah, sounds wonderful and very rich. I mean, there's a lot of experience behind what you're sharing. I really appreciate you making this available. Um, and then just to wrap things up, I want to just go back to our initial conversation about KP counseling, and that the phone number there, if you'd like to reach out, is 844-394-3457. You can also find them on the Addiction Hope website, and you can visit KP Counseling online at kpcounseling.com. Kevin, is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I think probably the biggest thing is that uh, not only with Shatter Our Silence and what we're trying to do on the journey, but specifically the work that we're doing at KP, is that we believe that everyone has a light within them, and that just because right now a person may feel like it's dark, um, that's where we're trying to, either through inspiration or hope through the journey, or education that we're trying to do through Shatter Our Silence, or the clinical counseling work that we're trying to do at KP, how to get that, how to brighten that light, how to shine that light, so the darkness will be less darkness and more of the light.
I love that. And it's so congruent with faith.
Yeah.
I think that as a Christian, that really applies to me, but I think folks of all faiths really identify with the concept of light and would like to have more light within and refract that outside of themselves.
And for most of us, at least for myself, the darkness that interferes with the light, in my case, very much that God light, and as a Christian, that Jesus light that's within me. What shadows that, that darkness that covers over, is usually lying between my ears and in my thinking, is usually what clouds that. And I need either a guidance through that darkness, or inspiration or hope or education to get through that, because I have to do the work myself, but I need assistance to do that, and that's okay. um, but we all have that light within us. It's just we need some assistance or guidance, or someone who's been there before us, to help navigate through, so we can remember and not necessarily listen to the darkness, but be gravitating toward the light.
Absolutely. Thank you for this very hopeful and inspiring time with you. And I wish you a very Merry Christmas, Kevin.
Well, thank you, and you have a great Christmas and a great New Year as well.
Thank you.